Hi, everyone. Hi, welcome. My name is Tayana. And on behalf of all of us at ABC Home and Deepak Home Base, we're thrilled to welcome you to this very, very special evening. We're here, of course, to celebrate the launch of Jenna Hollenstein's new book, Eat to Love. Let's give her a warm round of applause. And this book, I've had the pleasure of reading it, and I'm really excited for you all to be able to read it because it's such a gift to the world. There's not a book out there like it, and just, there's so many favorite things that I could mention about it, but really what this book helps us to do, and this is in Jenna's language, is shift our allegiance back from the external things telling us what, when, and how much to eat, to internal sensations of physical hunger and fullness, personal preference, and what we find satisfying. So in this world where there's so many external things telling us what to do, who to be, just this beautiful guidance back to ourselves, back home into our own inner compass is so needed, and I know will be treasured by many. Now, before we get started, I'm honored to introduce Emme to the stage. So for over 2 decades now, she's been a leading voice and face in the fashion industry. She's, of course, a world-renowned supermodel, and with the conviction that beauty comes in all shapes and sizes. Thank you. Thank you. Emme has paved the way and given women a voice to feel beautiful and empowered. Her message is clear: to awaken the inner magnificence inherent in each of us, to be whole. So I can't think of a better person to be on stage with Jenna discussing this book, Kindred Souls. Yes. Aww. And now to introduce Jenna, I'd like to introduce Susan Piver, who is the publisher of the book and also a beautiful Buddhist teacher with many books of her own. Susan, will you come up, please?
Thank you, Tayana. And thank you, ABC. I'm Deepak Home Base for hosting this event. And it is my honor and privilege to say a little bit about Jenna. Together with my partner, Crystal Gandrud, we started very recently, a publishing imprint called Lionheart Press that's meant to bring the spiritual voices of the future into right now. And it's really hard for me to think of anyone more wonderful to work with than Jenna as a voice of the present, certainly, and of the future, in that she brings really deep Buddhist teachings into the way we look at our bodies, the way we eat food, the way we feel about being women or men, and the way we carry ourselves, I would say, in the world. She's a nutrition therapist, a meditation teacher, a mom, and I love her. I really, really love her. And I'm so proud to be associated with this book. And thank you, Emme, for helping to bring this message out too. Eat to Love is the first of its kind. There is no other book that brings this deep, rich, spiritual, ancient wisdom to our lives in the way we feel in our bodies. So thank you for writing it. We very much look forward to hearing from both of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for publishing it. Well, are we ready?
Sure.
Oh, the moment, so I have to do a little background here. When Jenna, and through a mutual friend, hey, Em, would you take a look at this book, and would you possibly write a foreword? And I said, sure, send it along, that's great. And it's, maybe a 16th of the books that I get a chance to read. I love reading, but I don't really do it. I do forwards for a lot of people or comments. And when I got Jenna's book, I was going, yup, okay, wow, yeah, all right. And it was the quickest read that I've ever had in a book because it just brought together the whole triad of the struggle that we all go through in this time and have been going through for quite so many decades, unnecessarily so. And it brought the tenets of a mentor of mine, Evelyn Triboli, right front and center, and Jen of intuitive eating. Some people know Evelyn Triboli. And she rocked my world when I got into speaking about body image and self-esteem and women's issues. And then I felt that Jenna took these beautiful principles of being present here, now, and just thrust it right into the spiritual realm of, there's a lot more going on here, ladies and gentlemen. And we can just remember, let me just try and bring you to data. Let me bring you to principles of spirituality, that it's not a preachy book, it's not a religious book in any way, but it felt like I was going back home. I was being connected to a very deep rooted source of understanding of who I was on this earth at this moment. So Jenna, I can't believe we're here already. We've been talking about this event for some time, and I don't want to waste another moment. So I want to just ask you, eat to love. Now, this is a concept that we do not understand unless you might be from a big Italian family and you really love to eat. But eat to love. How did you come to the title of the book?
So I can't take credit for that because my mom says it. And it's an expression that's always been in our family, where she says, Uncle Rob came over, he ate to love, And she usually says something like he threw his ears back and he dove into a bowl of corned beef and cabbage, I think was my Uncle Rob's thing. And so I remember where I was on 3rd Avenue when I thought I'm going to name my business Eat to Love. But it wasn't until I had already filed the paperwork and done everything that I realized the sort of deeper implication of eating as a form of love. Not just a form of enjoyment and pleasure and satisfaction, but a form of love for ourselves. And then maybe even a way of showing love for other people. It just seemed like I can't take credit for that deeper meaning that I realized afterward. But it's just something that's grown in significance over the time that I've used those words.
I just get a kick from eating with love and self-love and caring, truly caring at a deep level. And then when you share the food that you make, that I love cooking with organic foods and turning on family and friends to new ideas and concepts. Now, when we first sat down and started talking about the genesis of this book and the why, you want to change a conversation. Can you share with us what conversation do you want to change and why is it so important?
Yeah, I haven't figured out how to do this successfully yet. I find that often whenever I sit down and start talking about what I feel are the deeper meanings of why we eat or don't eat or feel a certain way about our bodies, the conversation has a tendency to veer off to people very well-intentioned kind of offering, well, I just do this. I just do that. This is
solutions,
what works for me.
right?
Solutions.
Or tips.
And what we miss by going off in what often reveals disordered eating patterns is what it is that we're really searching for somehow. What this relationship with food and body has become for many of us, which is much more than meeting energy needs. It really seems like it's become, I see it as a spiritual issue because it seems to be so related to, because of the issues of weight and and health and all of these things.
Perceived weight, or is it the perception that we're wrong, or there's something that we have to change that is
Yeah.
tripping us up?
Yeah, I think, we have become sort of alienated from a sense of ownership of our bodies, a sense of sensitivity and the ability to discern what they're telling us at any specific time and what they need. And we've sort of deferred that judgment to others.
So you're saying that our bodies actually talk to us? Dun-dun-dun. But
Yeah.
really, I mean, there might be, that is not a concept that
Right.
we're taught at a young age.
Right.
That our bodies are actually telling us that we want something sweet, we want something sour, we want something salty or savory or whatever it might be, or we need more fruit. So the conversation, instead of thinking externally, that we'll take the cues from the outside, which we're being taught, and billions of dollars upon billions of dollars is being made on that concept. You're saying to change the conversation, start to listen
Well,
in a different
yeah,
way.
Because what I have observed in having a 3.5-year-old, for example, is that we come out of the womb liking sweet things, by the way, which is what helps us drink breast milk or formula, that sensitivity and that like for sweet. And we very clearly know, like, when we're hungry, when we're full, when we don't like green beans, when we're all about green beans. We know these things, and it's not complicated. And then somewhere along the way, it becomes complicated. And my son's in daycare, and I sometimes get videos from the app, and I saw that they had a dentist come in and speak to them, and I'm like, oh, finally, somebody's going to teach him how to brush his teeth properly. But rather, she was telling them and having them come back to her with what are good foods to eat and what are bad foods to eat. And so this is a 3.5-year-old, and of course my kid's the one like, coffee? Brownies? And she's like, no, that's not good food to eat, And then you see the kids kind of getting it, like, carrots? They learn how to perform. And so what happens is that they start to get this feeling that they can't trust that brownies are awesome.
Right.
And so they give you what you want, and then they develop the habit of just feeling badly about liking what they like. And then when you bring into that the weight piece, the fear that comes from, if you trust your body to guide you towards brownies, then you'll gain weight. And gaining weight is bad because it's unhealthy and it's unappealing. And there's so many different
and so on,
implications of that.
But it starts at a very young age,
Yes.
and it's perpetuated throughout the family concept and construct, where grandmother, mother, father, grandfather, the ideals and the beliefs and for the fear of the body, instead of truly listening and having the joy around a variety of foods. And even we should take a step farther back, because in your book you talk about the spiritual connection to wholeness often, where that's not a part of the conversation. It's almost replaced by that external, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know how you feel, let me sell you something, let me tell you that your body is going to deceive you. And then it's a real travesty.
Well, and that's
that
what
and I think we're dawning from that now slowly, but how do we get out of that horrible cycle?
I think that's part of what I believe needs to be the new conversation, is what we're really seeking in how we relate to food in our bodies. And the more I was thinking about it, the more it seemed like we were just looking for all of the things that all of us as human beings want. Safety, security, visibility, inclusion, love, feeling desired. That's what we want. We just want those things, but because of the systems around us and the corporations around us, and even the establishment of the medical establishment and the way that it's been altered by a bias against fat and people in bigger bodies, it's getting totally warped. So we we're sort of we're seeking something that we can't help but seek. But we're starting to believe, or we have long believed at this point, that we can find it in how we eat. If we can just get the right diet, if we can just, refine our bodies a little bit more.
Will be more valuable.
Well, we are told that implicitly and explicitly, but there's also a sort of undercurrent of it.
And that's the spirituality.
That's the spirituality piece.
Knocking. It won't stop knocking. It will continually push us forward. And we think towards another diet, right? We think towards another relationship. We think towards another body enhancement or whatever, right?
Right.
And it's just like, hello, it's just me.
So when the conversation starts and people start saying, well, just give up sugar, we never kind of get there. We never get under the surface of, we all want the same thing. And also, what about all this data that shows us that the diet mentality and the supposed common sense of eat less, move more, what about the fact that this has completely screwed us up? I mean, I went to see a doctor today, and he asked me, so what do you think about the obesity epidemic? And I'm like, I think I caused it. I think I and people like me handing out what we thought was the right advice further distorted people's sensitivity to their bodies, and it exacerbated this issue. I've heard it described as an epidemic of disconnection rather than an epidemic of obesity. That I can get behind because it is an epidemic of disconnection. But again, I mean, it's just our culture is so inculcated with this idea that being thin is healthy and being fat is unhealthy.
It's an epidemic on both sides. We have an epidemic of anorexia and associated disorders. In that vein, we're celebrating National Eating Disorders Awareness Week. Right. It's wonderful that we're having this conversation right now. But when you take a look at the idolization of the models that are on the runway, now we're slowly having an opening of an aperture for the ideal of beauty that is actually very, very refreshing. But I want to step back for a moment. What was your journey? I know, but I want you to share with everybody. What was your journey? How did you contribute before? And when was your Kundalini experience of saying, aha, I need to pivot? When was your pivoting moment? And how did you begin, and when was the pivot?
Yeah, I mean, I was a typical girl in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s. I tried every diet known to man. I can't believe I left Deal-A-Meal out of this book. Remember Deal-A-Meal?
Yes.
Richard Pryor. Not Richard Pryor. I heard about Richard Pryor. Richard Simmons. Yeah. I can't believe I left that out. So, and then I flash forward to the late 90s when I'm at Tufts University becoming a dietitian and getting my master's in nutrition, and I'm at my most disordered, and I'm drinking cheap red wine from a jug to deal with my strong emotions. Then flash forward to working as a medical writer for years because I just didn't trust that we were supposed to be handing out information like this, like handing down knowledge from the top of the mountain to people who needed it. Not acknowledging that we were all on our own path. We're all figuring this out because we all have these constantly changing bodies.
So you didn't go into becoming a nutritionist because a dietitian because it was just like, something's not fitting here. I went into research.
I went into research and I was writing about it because I figured if I could be closer to the people doing the research, I could figure out what was actually true. But over time, I realized how difficult it is to actually do really well-controlled nutrition research just because there's so many variables and because there's so many psychological factors that we can't control for.
Did it make a difference with whom the research was being funded by?
Of course.
Okay.
I mean,
because that's a big deal. Independent research is so, so important when we read research and data.
But even
we're being
now,
swayed
yeah,
a lot of times.
But even now, I mean, there is almost always, there needs to be some sort of weight component to a study rather than different kind of qualitative evaluators to assess what's really improvement, But anyway, so
Yeah,
after
so
that
how old
period,
were you? Yeah, how old were you around that time?
I was in my late 20s, and then in my early 30s, I got sober. And I quit drinking at 33, just like Caroline Knapp, who wrote the best book about drinking in history, Drinking a Love Story. And
Put your phone like right up here a little bit. So
oh,
we
right
can,
there? Okay.
So, and just repeat the name of the book because that might be helpful.
Caroline Knapp, Drinking a Love Story. It's the best. And I realized why I was drinking. And I realized why I had been dieting and continued to diet at that time. I realized why I shopped too much and went out with the wrong guys on Match.com. I realized I was trying to change my reality in a way that was moving me further away from my reality. And so somewhere along that path, I re-met Evelyn Tribole in Houston, and
There are no coincidences. Seriously, right? None.
and we realized that we practiced the same form of meditation, which I had been practicing, and this is part of the sort of realization of all these kind of distortions that I had going on in my
What
mind.
kind of a meditation? What
It's
kind?
a Buddhist meditation called shamatha, and it's just a very simple open eye breath awareness technique. So through that period was when all of these things started to come together very quickly. The drinking stuff and like sort of the use of behaviors or even thoughts to distract or to self-medicate.
Very reflective of culture.
Yes, totally. The meditation piece and how that allows us to, I think it reminds us how to feel.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Well, and it trains us to stay as our lives go like this, as we start to really feel. Because what I would have done in the past, whenever things started to get a little hairy, was to bring some distraction into the mix. A drink, anything. A diet, I need to change, I need to do this juice cleanse. It's just sort of using these little distractions to move further away from what actually, when you start to pay close attention to it, is magical. Those just like little moments of actually being with your real life, with the other people that are in your life.
The good, the bad, the ups, the downs. I recently, I've been reading different books and going into meditation after, and the concept of life is not supposed to be real easy.
Yeah.
I just did not know that when I was in my 20s and 30s. I just didn't. I looked at other families and thought, oh, why do they have it so much easier? And we are given in the reflection of our media, we're given in the reflection of our advertising, one modality of happy. And it's pretty singular in ethnicity, and it's singular in a lot of different ways. And I succumbed to that, and I realize now that when things are really hard, to deal with it. To not be afraid to just be.
Well, and now with people
be.
on social media, where
Oh,
everything
that's
is
a
like
whole-
curated,
Yes.
you see this kind of
This couldn't
picture
come at a better time.
Yeah.
The concepts of bringing the spirituality back into
even the body
conversation.
positivity movement, I think, is really interesting to look at in terms of like social media, because, as it catches on and as companies like Weight Watchers kind of co-opt the messages of body positivity, people are learning to sort of take some of that messaging, even if they're still selling self-improvement in the form of a diet. And what you find is almost a performance quality to people. Well, this is what I think body positivity must look like. It's bikini selfies on Instagram. It, instead of acknowledging that it might actually look like taking yourself to the doctor or giving yourself a sick day.
Or getting in a bathtub and
Or getting in a
enjoying
bathtub.
bubbles.
I mean, there's just so many different nuances and so much more authenticity to a true a truly loving relationship with your body than feeling great about your body all the time, because that's never going to happen. And then that's going to make you question whether there was any of it to begin with, or if it was all just smoke and mirrors in the first place, you know?
So the pivot wasn't just a lightning bolt that hit, it was a growing progression of awareness.
And it's still happening.
Yes.
It's still happening because since I wrote the book, I feel like the realizations of the implications of what we're looking for and how they affect us as a culture, they're just deepening. It would be a different book if I wrote it today.
It's perfect for right now. It really is. There's a couple of parts of the book that I'd like to read out loud, and I want to go into the 6 paramitas. Or I'm learning my Buddhism. Pardon me, everybody, but you mentioned to me from time to time, oh, you're so this, you're so that. I'm like, oh, thank you. I don't know what you're talking about, but I do meditate, but I think this really sums up what we're just talking about. Underlying our confusion about what to eat and our anxiety about our bodies is something disconcerting. We live with a perpetual sense of an inadequacy, a belief that we're not okay as we are, that we are problems to be fixed. I don't know how many of you are so sick and tired of feeling like this. How many of you would like this to change? I mean, for once and for all, right? Generosity, discipline, patience, exertion, meditation, and wisdom. Please talk to us about the 6 paramitas.
So this was a hunch I had. For some reason, I think sometimes certain teachings, certain sayings, certain teachers just like really get under your skin and kind of stay with you. And the 6 paramitas is a teaching that, like, I can't help but stare at Susan when I'm talking about it, because I learned it from her, and then it's been with me. I remember when I brought my baby home from the hospital, I had like a little sticky note with like the 6 paramitas that I would put wherever I was breastfeeding. I just wanted it there. And just as a little background, the paramitas are traditionally taught as something that sort of a framework that we use when working with others. So in sort of framing how we relate to others. But I was thinking for this topic, this idea and how difficult it can be to relate to ourselves with gentleness. You know, when somebody says, well, what would you do if couldn't you treat yourself like your best friend? Somehow that doesn't work for people, And so could we imagine ourselves as like this beloved other? And then use the 6 paramitas, which are, of course, a perfect container for examining this, to guide us in rebuilding that relationship.
Stop with the beating ourselves up, the self-flagellation with the palm fronds and right. I feel that. I do that sometimes, and I almost stop in mid-flight and say, what am I doing?
Well, and it's shocking if you say those words out loud.
Yeah. So do you have these up in the house, and you have them?
They're just burned in my brain now.
Yes. Generosity, discipline, patience, exertion. Can you explain the exertion one?
Yeah. I wanted to touch on the discipline one too, because I think that discipline is really interesting in like the diet mentality. A lot of us think of like discipline as a sort of no-brainer because it's all about like willpower and observing rules. But I love the Buddhist definition of discipline, which is just coming back. It's just like noticing where you are in space, catching yourself kind of when you get lost, and just coming back. And the body, if we're treating ourselves as this beloved other, serves as that perfect kind of home base to come back to. So there's no right or wrong. There's no punishment with discipline. And then the other thing, and I tried to do this with all of the paramitas, kind of like, this is how we sort of traditionally think of these things with the diet mentality, or like magical eating and magical thinking about eating. This is how we frame them in this way. So, one of the things that keeps the diet mentality alive and well is the roller coaster. Particularly the beginning of it. Because as Evelyn talks about, beginning a new diet can feel like falling in love, right? Because you start thinking about how much better your life is going to be, and all the clothes you're going to be able to wear, and the people that'll turn their heads at, the bar mitzvah, and, all of these things. And I just lost my train.
It just doesn't happen.
It just doesn't happen.
It's like, and then all of a sudden you're at that plateau and you're like, what's going on? I'm starving.
Well, right. I mean, it does follow a predictable lifespan, right?
Yes.
But
It's horrible. It's a horrible cycle.
But we think that because the next one is called Whole30 instead of keto, it's going to be different.
Right.
Even though it's the same thing with just a different brand, slightly different brand. And usually
It's a
they've
road
been
to
recycled.
nowhere.
And they've been recycled for how many decades now? There's nothing new,
Is it 98% of all diets fail? Or 100?
Well,
whatever.
it's somewhere in the 90s. And then also the people who succeed in maintaining weight loss, I mean, if you look at the amount of time and effort required to do that, it really does call into question whether it's normal eating or disordered eating. So the falling in love part of the falling in love part of the diet keeps people coming back. So with this other path of getting rid of dieting and accepting and treating your body as it is right now, how do you maintain that kind of engagement and that excitement? And so that's what exertion is about. And in that chapter, I use this framework, this slogan that has 5 steps to it. And one of the things that I've realized since the book was completed is that it is a wonderful sub-container for this journey, because it talks about creating an intention, and then, which is connected to your values, and then checking in with it at the end of the day. What allowed me to maintain that? What made it more difficult? It's about becoming familiar with your cycles and being willing to stay with them long enough to look at them and understand what purpose did they serve. It guides you to identify even the smallest little ways in which you are eating to love, and how you can work with the diet mentality in an ongoing way. So if I were to write it again today, that chapter would be longer. Because I realized that is a really useful framework for people just on
Get
a
off that bus and get
Yeah.
on this bus.
Just on a day-to-day basis, to have little touch points. Because, if my hunch is right, then this could be the path that you're on for the rest of your life. You don't have to worry about finding the next one. So because it is for the rest of your life, you might need some things to kind of refer back to in order to provide that kind of motivation and connection and reminder of, why am I even here?
You're explaining this, and I want you to come out with stickies for the house. I really do. I think we just need to see really positive messaging, and the 6 paramitas might be one of them. It would be great to have it in your office, in your car, just to repeat. And I sometimes write, God bless you, I sometimes write on mirrors with grease pens that you can easily erase, but I write, "Hi, beautiful, you're rocking today, and you're kind, you're generous, you're sweet, you're kick-ass goddess." And you can do this, because I live alone. I have a daughter, and we write notes back and forth to each other. And it's very important to get the positive feedback and to train ourselves to get out of this rigmarole of just self-defeat. Life is too darn short to waste our serious time.
Can I turn the tables on you for one moment?
Please do.
So I think of Emme to the body positive movement the way I think of John Kabat-Zinn to the mindfulness movement, because Because if Emme was not doing what she was doing, I mean, it's more than 2 decades ago, right?
Like 30, but we're not counting. Hi, Louise.
I don't know that we would be where we are now. And I don't know that we always give credit where credit is due. But my question is about, assuming that it's an appealing thought to let go of that self-critical soundtrack and to replace it with one that's actually more true and loving and positive and encouraging. A lot of us have a hard time doing that. And I talk about like ways of trying to kind of transform our soundtracks to become more self-compassionate, but I'm curious how you did it, because you also did it in a very public way, and you did it with a lot of people telling you not to.
I'm an athlete, so I got rid of a lot of energy that might have been pent up because I was very active as a child. I probably would have been ADD, ADHD, whatever the heck it is, but because they didn't know what that was back then. But I know I have all this energy for a reason to not give up. I know that I'm on a second win this time, coming into 2019, 2020. Back at the beginning, I was made fun of pretty badly by a photographer, and actually turned on my heel and wanted to walk away from the industry. And it wasn't until a year later that I was down in Miami and saw this photographer who was all cleaned up. He was having some serious issues. He was a big photographer, and he looked at me, and I'd had some success with some public speaking, and he said, wow, we've got to work together. He forgot that we even worked together. I seriously almost left the industry. And at that moment, in Miami, when I was handing him his phone for a phone call from the cafeteria, where we were all getting our RVs ready for the day, and my German client was so awesome. We would leave at 10 o'clock, so I'd help the luncheonette lady with all the coffees for all the crews, because of course that would be good, because I would meet all the creative directors, all the casting directors, and like, hey, what's up? They're like, okay. And I got a lot of work doing that, so it's not all touristic, but I realized when I gave him that, and he didn't recognize that we worked together, and I really almost left. I said, my goodness gracious. What's being told to me, the naysayers, and that I am fat, or I am this, or I shouldn't be here, or I got growled at on TV when I was when I was a reporter for E. It had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with where everybody comes from their own family. And the bullying that was being projected onto me was just something that I had to just deal with. And I was a big girl, not physically, but emotionally. I was a big girl too. I was like, get down and do 20. I'm going to tell you right now. I'm going to bang it out, because no one talks to me like that. But I realized that I grew a thick skin, and that all I had to do was not to believe what people had to say, forgive quickly, love deeply in the work that I knew that I was supposed to be doing, and move on, and just keep going forward. And being an athlete really did help keep a lot of that anxiety that we get right here, that we just get all crunched up and we are so anxious. I am a swimmer. Stroke, 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 away it went. Running, not so much. Cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, things that gave me joy to my physical, beautiful, strong body. And it allowed me to keep coming back. And the media was very much on my side. I was very, very lucky that there were a lot of wonderful women and men that had family members that had their own journeys and body image issues, and really wanted to report that there was something really not right here, that we did not have to succumb. So that's how I made it through. I was very lucky in a lot of different ways. Thank you.
Well, what I think is so interesting about it, and the case I sort of make in this book, is that when we are allowing ourselves to just be authentically who we are, because that is, the greatest offering that we have, we end up benefiting others. And so watching you and your trajectory and all of the work that you do that is of benefit to others as an advocate for eating disorders awareness, the work that you've been doing behind the scenes, to build the inclusive fashion world, that's the point. That's sort of the point. And so where we seem to get it backward in kind of looking for belonging and acceptance.
Fitting in.
And fitting
No
in
way.
by literally fitting in, what we're missing is so much bigger and more important and needed, And I just think about, like, how many people are spending so much of their mental real estate on finding problems and then trying to fix them, when they could be probably using their gifts to fix the real problems we've got.
Or having more joy.
Having more joy. I mean, being a joyful partner, being a joyful mother,
Enjoying sex more.
Totally. The sex thing is a whole other...
Seriously.
Yes.
Body freedom. Enjoy sex. Enjoy it.
Right. But the idea that only thin bodies can have sex or desirable...
No. It one begets the other, begets the other, begets the other.
That's my next book, by the way.
Oh, really good. I hope so, because I really would listen. Life is too short. I've gone through cancer, and if we're going to be feeling really self-conscious in the bedroom, everybody has a body that should be loved and adored, and if we can learn how to do that for ourselves first. Dig our bodies, get into it, so that when you do co-join with somebody else, just have fun.
It's true, because I think that taking joy and being present and being fully embodied does make the world better.
Oh, yes. Amen to that. So we are about 5 till 8.
Okay.
There's so many different parts to this book. I suggest that you go home. Please read this book. I don't have to once you crack the spine and you get into the first few pages, you're going to get that nice hot cup of tea or beverage or wine, and you're going to either get into bed or a comfy chair, and you're going to thumb through this pretty quickly, underline, share with friends, shoot sections, and have your own speaking circles at home and with your communities. If you have book clubs, get this into the book club. It is just yummy and great. It's nourishing to the soul. Yeah. So so is there a lasting or wrapping up comments? Because I'd love to have some folks ask questions of you.
Yeah, no, I would love to answer questions,
Yeah.
and I just want to say thank you again, and that you are proof that this is true.
Thank you.
This is
It
true.
is. Well, thank you. I feel very, very honored. So, do we have a microphone? Yes. Oh, fantastic. Please just raise your hand and jump in. No question is silly, and this is the chance to really talk to a professional that is walking the walk and talking the talk and is in the right space for this wonderful conversation.
Hi, my name is Aaliyah. Thank
Hi,
you
Aaliyah.
so much for both of you for this event. I, a few years ago, had a spontaneous Kundalini Shakti awakening and have lived my whole life up and down, weight, dieting. I was told to diet from the time I was about 7, 8. And for me, what's been really interesting going through this awakening and going through what it feels like to be able to feel my body and need to love my body, and have walked through this world very confident as a big person and clear that I'm beautiful. But when I had the awakening, it was like, I can't get into my body because I hate my body. And it was really intense to experience what I had thought that I had overcome through being empowered in these different ways. But then when I got down into my root and what had been sort of built into my root from birth and then moving into adulthood, I didn't get to be just the confident big girl anymore. And so my question, it's less of a question, it's more if you could talk a little bit on, in terms of what it is to, because you've been speaking of this as a sort of spiritual experience as well, to discuss a little more about what it is to walk a feminine path into embodiment. As you go through both an emotional, psychological, and spiritual experience of opening to what it means to be truly understanding of your worth.
Oh, that one's an easy one.
Thank you so much.
It's such a beautiful
Really.
question. And I think about this stuff all the time. And with like Crystal, the editor of this book, and Susan, the publisher of this book, we talk about these things all the time because there is such an imbalance going on. I'm even reading, I think the sexuality piece comes into it so much, and I'm reading a lot of books about this, including Nadia Bowles-Weber's book, Shameless, where she talks a little bit about femininity and sexuality and things like this. I almost feel like sometimes, I mentioned the kind of performance nature of the body positive and the self-love stuff. I think we enter into it through whatever door or window we can, whether it's through the people that we're with, the teachers that we're drawn to, or something like that. We get it on a certain level, and it's real when we get it that way. And then, as time goes on, things deepen and change and become more nuanced. And we understand things differently and might have a tendency to discount our realizations from before. I think that they weren't real somehow. When I think what's happening is that we are just getting deeper and deeper into our understanding because we're so dynamic and everything around us is so dynamic and changing. Walking the spiritual path with sort of a balance of the masculine and feminine and being willing to fully be with your body, which is going to suck sometimes, because they hurt and they get old.
They haven't been listened to.
They haven't been listened to.
And peeling back the onion, it's going to be messy.
And even when you listen to them, they don't always behave.
No, and if your journey is farther along than maybe what you might be giving yourself credit for, just stay in that safe place and peel back that onion and read and nourish yourself and be still. And do you meditate? Yes. What did you?
I have to.
Yeah,
She said.
yeah. So there's wonder. I mean, you can give examples of very basic meditations, and because when you're in that place between your breath, that is where you are absolutely perfect. You're doing nothing, and if you were not told from when you were young and you were born, and when you were at 8 told to go on a diet, all that has to be forgiven, not just put in a box, but you have to kind of let each thing come and just forgive it and forgive them and forgive. Well, there's work to be done, but it's worth it. It's worth it. And joyously saying, good for you, I'm doing this. And as often as you can, write on your mirrors. Read this book over and over. Get it all wrinkled and with sticky notes, and then there's a whole bunch of resources in the back, which I really, really, really appreciated your resources. I was like, yes, this is great. So just take each day as it comes. You're in no rush, but you're on a wonderful journey. Just be gentle. Be gentle.
And I would also say to allow yourself to be exactly where you are. You don't need to get anywhere. And where you were in the past was where you were. That's all we can do. That's kind of the practice, is like be where we are and be with ourselves as we are. And I think that that's a form of self-love, to kind of know when to maybe push yourself a little bit more toward the edge. But, self-aggression is never going to heal self-aggression. And so I believe that gentleness is really, my teacher, Susan Piver, says it's the ultimate practice. Gentleness is the ultimate practice. And to truly have that balance of masculine and feminine, we need to include that.
Hi. Hi, I'm Megan. I have a question more on the journey, as most of the journey I would see is an individual journey. However, when you choose a life partner, is there ever a time where, there's a path for two to go down together? Just quick background, like for me, I dealt with the eating disorder. I've been in recovery for about 10 years, but I dealt with it for like 5 to 6 years in and out. That my fiance, he comes from a different side. He's overweight, and we have to deal with trying to eat healthy, but try not to be disordered eating and all that, like that fine line, if you will. I guess my question is there any advice where, although there's a part of an individuality to go down your own path, where you could go down it together as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I think with the entering into it with the knowledge and being okay with the fact that you are in two separate bodies, and so you are the expert of yourself the same way he is the expert of himself. But ultimately, the goal is the same, and I would say that would be intuitive eating. Can
you explain what that is? Because
Yeah.
how many people know what intuitive eating is here? Just a few.
Intuitive eating is essentially eating primarily according to physical signs of hunger and fullness, having unconditional permission to eat, so there's basically no restrictions involved and therefore no restrictions to fight against, and having means of coping with emotions that don't involve food. Those are like the 3 criteria that make up the kind of model when it's been researched in the literature. So, I understand that you see it as coming from 2 different directions, but in a sense, the direction could be the same sort of potentially disconnection that I was mentioning earlier, of just not connecting with this thing, in real time, and asking, what's happening, what do you need, what are you communicating, how can I care for you? That is a beautiful thing to do as a team. And that is, I think, I would highly recommend intuitive eating and the intuitive eating workbook too, in terms of just knowing some of the questions to ask, and like, do you have different ways of thinking about this, or do you find that it's actually the same sort of underlying theme that's driving a lot of the dynamics in the relationship with food and body?
Anyone else?
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation and for the book. I can't wait to read it. I have a pretty healthy self-dialogue and conversation, right? Really clear about my purpose. I'm a cancer survivor as well, and it really changed everything for me in terms of my direction and my path and how it is I spend my days. So I'm very centered. I have a dedicated practice of meditation. That same core, purpose-driven, values-based, day-to-day life doesn't seem to translate or consistently cover the relationship that I have with food.
Yeah.
Right? So I have lost and found pounds over the years. And so I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts or advice on how that same groundedness, that same core and purpose-driven path permeates this aspect of my day-to-day.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that if you were to ask everyone in this room, or ask a lot of people, that sort of black hole, that kind of blind spot when it comes to food and body is very common. I think it has to do with all of the different places that we're getting these messages from. And I can't help but say, I mean, the medical establishment is a big, big offender because it seems like no amount of data to the contrary will dissuade them from focusing on weight, which we don't have any control over. You know, instead of behaviors, which, hey, we do have control over.
And self-care.
And self-care.
And self-care.
Yeah. So I would just like to acknowledge to you and allow you to acknowledge to yourself that this is a really common thing. And I think, you know, for some reason, it seems like an exception to the rule. For some reason, and I think it has to do with the expectations on women's bodies, the expectations on the body to be healthy, which is ultimately, you know, it's a choice for each of us if we want to prioritize wellness. Most of us do.
And there's health at many different sizes.
Yeah. But there is such a moral stigma to food and eating and pleasure and enjoyment and fat and weight that is very difficult to move away from. Because even if, I mean, I've talked to so many people that they're like, oh, I don't have an issue with that. I just, you know, eat clean. And not even realizing the sort of moral imperative underlying all of their choices. All of their choices. And the little subtle ways in which they're speaking to themselves when they toe the party line versus when they buck the system. You know? We internalize these messages from all of these different directions, and then we become, I think it's Reagan Chastain that calls us an unpaid marketing army for all of the people and parties that benefit from our thinking this way about ourselves. But I want to reassure you, even though any process of change is difficult, and unlearning some very deeply habitual thoughts and relearning other ones, even if they happen to be ones that we sort of thought way before, there's so much data in the science supporting this. There is an approach called health at every size. And there's a small army growing of people who are practicing in this. There are healthcare practitioners who are taking courses from other healthcare practitioners to convert their traditional practice that's focused on outcomes of weight loss to behaviors that actually can give people agency in their own lives and in their own health and well-being. So I do believe that we are in a good place, and I thank you for your labor for decades, building us toward this moment, and for keeping on it, because it's growing. There are so many, I mean, if you want a good glimpse of resources, look at the Militant Bakers resource list. Just Google the Militant Bakers resource list, and you will find like blogs and Instagram accounts and tons of resources where you can help that neuroplasticity along by bathing your tofu brain in the right stuff so that you're not reinforcing the stuff that allows the food and body to fall in that blind spot.
You don't have to write anything down. You're going to see all this in the back. There's websites and blogs, podcasts. How many of us do? You've got to do a podcast. You do. You really do. I'd really like you to do one. If that's one of the things that I'll talk to you about that. Eating disorder support and books. So you have a whole good homework assignment in here. Just, it's refreshing. It's like a big bouquet of flowers just got shoved into your brain. You know, it's true though. It's really, really important to get away from the value being driven only based on the body. No wonder our souls are crying out, hear me, see me, feel me, understand me. There's such a disconnection that, you know, we are these beautiful, amazing souls on this human journey. We are here for a purpose, not just to lose weight and make others billions upon billions and billions and billions millions of dollars.
But we need our bodies.
We need
because our
these
bodies
beauti-
are the ones that
we
let
need
us
to
do all the stuff.
Jump, and we need to swim and snowshoe. We need to love it. We need to listen to this beautiful best friend, this vehicle that just heals when it gets cut and it has a broken limb. All of a sudden, it's healing. It's amazing.
It is the original
It gives
long-term
birth.
relationship.
When we gave birth, I was so blown away when I gave birth to Toby. I was like, whoa, this is really something. How can I beat myself up anymore? It just doesn't make any sense. And breast milk was coming out. I was like, wow. And when I hug, I try and think about my body's perspective. When I hug someone that I love and people that know me, I just get in there for a hug. I like to feel their body. And without our bodies, we just have a soul going, oh, darling, hello.
Yeah, then we need both.
We
We can't
need-
leave one out and include the other.
We need it all. Any other questions?
I think we have time for one
more question?
And we'll go back here.
Hi. My question, I started reading this book, and I haven't had this experience in a long time with a book where I felt like an overwhelming resistance to reading, where I felt like if I kept reading, I'd have to be accountable to change my lifestyle in a certain way. And I also felt this book feels threatening to me in probably a radical way. And so I was just wondering, what do you think it is that you're threatening?
Great question. Thank you for being our last question. Go for it.
That is a great question. I thought you were going to ask me what to do about it, and I was going to say, put it down. I think actually what I'm threatening is sort of a radical thing, and that's that we are immensely expansive and powerful, and we haven't the slightest idea because we have been focusing on compliance for all the wrong reasons, not even for good reasons. Sometimes there are good reasons for compliance, but not even for those. I think that's it.
You're bucking the system.
Yeah.
You're swimming upstream.
Well, you can,
You're giving power back.
if you
and we're
allow
not
yours-
used to it.
Yeah. If you allow yourself to be where you are on this path, wherever you are, even if it's like, I don't want to read this book, it does not make me feel good, you might find that there are moments where you get a glimpse of what your life could be like, what your mother's life could be like, what your daughter's life could be like, what life could be like if our most valuable currency were not evaluated the way it is right now.
Thank you so much. And this is pretty revolutionary, actually, what you're offering. It's very refreshing. I feel really refreshed after that conversation, right? So Jenna will be signing books outside, and we just ask that you leave the way that you entered, which is right back here, and then we'll form a line, and she'll be right out there signing for you. And I wanted to say, too, if you want to keep up on our next events, you can go to abchome.com and then click on the events tab, and you'll see everything we have coming up. And then another way to follow us, of course, is Facebook. Deepak Home Base is our Facebook page. And we're also on Instagram. So thank you so much for coming. It was a beautiful evening, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.